present yourself, say who you are to the people who are going to be watching.
Okay, well, my name is J. Stephen Roberts, and I run a multimedia platform on the Crusades. You know, we have a YouTube channel where we do regular videos and podcasts on the Crusades. We also have a blog where we do regular blog posts weekly on the Crusades. I have a bachelor's in history with a concentration on medieval Europe. I mean, I've just been running Real Crusades history for about the past 5-6 years. So.
First, let me do one about the idea of crusading. What made so many people leave Europe and go crusade? Many people who, contrary to the belief of many people, had possessions in Europe and left it all behind so they could go crusading.
That's definitely one of the most interesting questions, I think, surrounding the Crusades. And I think, you know, for anybody who wants to understand that question, the place to go first is this book by Jonathan Riley Smith called The First Crusaders. That was kind of this groundbreaking book where he actually assembled as much charter information. And these are documents we have from the Middle Ages that give specific information about individuals, like an individual knight, his family, what he did with his lands, you know, what he did with his family and his plans for going on the crusade. And we have a ton of this. And for the first time, this information was organized by Jonathan Riley Smith. And what he did was he really looked at all, you know, these hundreds and hundreds, in some cases thousands of documents. He organized them all, and he asked the question, do these documents support some of these traditional myths about the Crusades, which, you know, a lot of the myths that came out of sort of the early 20th century, you know, the late 19th century, was this idea that Crusaders were people who were poor back home, who were just trying to, you know, go get some wealth in the East. Crusaders were criminals. Crusaders were second sons, you know, who were disinherited, who were trying to find an inheritance elsewhere. And what he found was all of those myths are just not true. Crusading tended to be concentrated in families, which is to say that, like, you know, oftentimes the head of a family, you know, the oldest son or the father would be involved in this, you know, maybe going with his sons or some of his other male relatives. It was a lot of the people who financed these expeditions who, you know, because some of the poorer knights and poorer crusaders, they wouldn't really be able to pay their own way. And so it was wealthy individuals who helped actually get groups of guys over there, you know, like their particular following, their particular group of knights, their retinue, their vassals. And, you know, these were people who had a lot to lose. You know, these were some of the important lords and barons in Western Europe. They had wealth and they had lands of their own, and they oftentimes went to great trouble and great expense to actually do this. And you have to ask yourself, why would somebody who has this good life, you know, this wealthy life, you know, the privileged elite, really, of this era, why would they, you know, leave their family, leave their possessions, and travel all the way across, you know, the known world to them to fight, you know, these wars in these faraway lands? You know, oftentimes there's just unbelievable suffering, and everybody understood that this was going to be that suffering was going to be involved in doing this. You know, Pope Urban II, when he made his first speech at Clermont, you know, in the accounts we have of that speech, there's emphasis on the fact that this is a sacrifice you're making. I mean, the only explanation for any of this is that there were deep religious motivations for doing this. I mean, medieval Europeans were religious. They believed this stuff. They believed in Christianity in the same way that, you know, people in our world today believe in germ theory or something like that. You know, I think for a lot of people in our world, religion is kind of this personal lifestyle choice. It doesn't have the teeth that it had for people in the medieval world. I mean, this was their universe. They absolutely believed that God wanted them to do this, and they took that up. And, you know, there was a concern for their own salvation too. I mean, there was a plenary indulgence attached to most crusades, and that meant that if you went on crusade, you would have temporal guilt attached to you know, sins you've committed in the past. That would be expunged in the next life. I've oftentimes had people, when I've made videos talking about indulgences, I've had people say, no, you're not quite explaining an indulgence correctly. And but it basically amounts to something like that. But yeah, I think religious motivations really are what explain, you know, why people did this more than anything. I mean, there were some people who, you know, people like Bohemond, and there were a few people who saw it as sort of an economic opportunity, but way above that, I mean, this was something that people were doing because of deep held beliefs.
Thank you. So yeah, thank you very much for the interview, and thanks for the work on your channel. I think it's one of the best historical channels on YouTube.
Well, thanks very much. I certainly appreciate that. And it was enjoyable talking with you guys today.
Thank you. It was enjoyable interviewing you as well.